Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show, and thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. While we're over there as well, if you could leave us a little review, again, it just helps us out even more, and it really does only take you 5 seconds, and we would be eternally grateful to you. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. Good to see you again, as ever. How are you getting on?
Aye, not bad. Not bad. Work is a nightmare again, but such is life, Lewis.
We got a bit of sunshine today, which was pretty good.
We did. So. That was lovely. It wasn't pissing down with rain, which is a real change of events.
And some lockdown easing announced as well, so maybe things in the next few months are going to get a bit better, which is
Lewis,
great.
Maybe we can play a video game together.
Very possibly.
That would be lovely, wouldn't it?
It may well be possible, yeah.
Anyway, Lewis, what have you been playing this week?
More Hitman, just tinkering away at that in the evenings. I've made some slow progress with Blasphemous. I haven't found as much time to play Blasphemous this week as I had in the past two, so my progress has slowed quite a bit. But one interesting thing that has happened, Mark, is that for quite a long time while I've been playing it, I've been swapping between handheld and docked. I'm playing on Switch. There's been times where I've thought, the frame rate here isn't the best. It's kind of laggy. It's got a sort of a stickiness to the movement and the combat at times. It hadn't really bothered me enough to do anything about it. I checked the options a few times, and I basically at one point while playing it over the last few days thought, this is actually getting kind of problematic.
Is this just because there was a lot of enemies on screen? It was like stuttering, basically.
At that particular point, yeah, but honestly, all through the game I had thought the movement, it felt, in comparison, again, to Hollow Knight, like Hollow Knight is so slick in its movement, and it's so buttery smooth at times.
Yeah, it's tight as anything.
And Blasphemous really isn't. Like, on the right trigger, you do a sort of slide dodge move. It gives you a sort of stylized sliding animation which kind of shows you at various points in the slide like almost as frames in themselves. Quite hard to explain that, but if you play it you'd know what I mean. There's just a lack of smoothness about it. But for the first time the other night I quit out of the game entirely on my Switch because it's the only game I've been playing on Switch, so I tend not to close it down ever.
Yeah.
And when I launched it again, it was totally fine. The frame rate had improved. There was none of that jitteriness. Still not as smooth as Hollow Knight, let me say, but something had improved. You know that way if you leave a computer on for too long, it can start to just go slow because it's got too many background processes going on. I don't think that is actually a thing that could happen here, but...
I mean, I don't know enough about the technical side of stuff, but maybe that's a sort of cache problem?
Yeah, something.
I don't really know.
It felt like something like that, and honestly, the issue hadn't ever kind of derailed my enjoyment of the game itself, but it was getting to a point where I thought, this isn't, other people playing this are going to have issues. It would be wrong of me not to say anything. And so having now sorted it, that's my recommendation. If anyone, maybe it's only a Switch issue, but I did Google it and saw some other people were saying that they were having performance issues with Blasphemous on Switch. So if you're one person like that, maybe just quit and restart the game and it might be better, because that is what I have found.
That is bizarre.
Yeah, pretty strange.
That very much sounds like a Switch thing rather than a game thing.
It could be, yeah.
Although, I don't know, maybe it's just not optimised as well as it could be. I don't know, maybe it's a combination of the two a little bit.
It was one of those things where I thought maybe there's been an update while I've been playing it. There didn't seem to be, but there you go. And just beyond that as well, Mark, last night I started playing Maquette, which is the puzzle game that was just recently given away on PS Plus. In fact, I think it's one of this month's games, if I'm right.
Yeah, it's still one of those months.
And honestly, Mark, I'm a big fan of puzzle games, and I'm a big fan of puzzle games that try new and interesting mechanics. But I don't think this is it, I'm afraid to say.
Oh man, I'm so disappointed to hear this, man. I must admit, when the Metacritic score came out for this game, I was thinking, oh, that's a good bit lower than I was thinking it was going to be. The game is obviously published by Annapurna as well, which is usually a pretty decent stamp of quality, Yeah, it's a real shame to not only read reviews that aren't exactly glowing, and then also you're turning around to me and saying, do you know what, actually, it's not that great either. I'm pretty disappointed because it was something that I had my eye on for a long time.
I mean, I would say if anyone's downloaded it or has PS Plus and can get a hold of it, you might as well play it. I played about 2 or 3 hours last night. I think it only is about 4 or 5 hours long. And it's not bad, don't get me wrong. The central conceit is interesting in itself. Essentially, you've got a toy version of the world that you're in. As you move objects in and out of that toy world, they appear bigger or smaller in the real world, and you use that to solve puzzles. So the most basic example being you pick up a toy, I'm using the word toy, they're not exactly toys, but you pick up a toy bridge in the real world that's tiny, and you put it down in the fake world, and suddenly a real big bridge appears in your world that you can now cross and enter a new world. That in and of itself is interesting enough and works, but it's just a really unenjoyable gameplay experience, and I don't say that very often.
How so?
Like, getting your head around the buttons even, like, it's square and circle to pick up objects and either move them out to be interacted with or hold them close to you so you can move faster, but it never feels like the right one that you're supposed to press. It feels like it should just be one button all the time to change how you can interact with objects, and it switches that a lot. You have to jump around in the toy world. You know, imagine you have a play version of the world that you're in front of you. You can climb inside it, but it's just really jittery and janky and uncomfortable. I think that's the word I would use to describe it. Playing it feels uncomfortable. Audible groans are what I was giving out at times while playing it, and not the puzzles are okay, they're difficult enough, they're interesting, but just playing it felt like a bit of a drudge. It does have a story. It's got what's obviously building towards how we met and then how we broke up type of story, and that's fine, and it uses the sort of text overlays that Edith Finch and other games like that have been using well recently to give you the story, but the story and the gameplay feel completely disconnected. I don't see what that story of this couple's relationship has to do really with what I'm having to do moment to moment. It just feels like a lot of different ideas all just kind of slapped together. I don't think I'm going to persevere with it, to be honest.
Wow. That's pretty damning. Honestly, I think because I had my eye on it for quite a while, and because it is free on PSN, I probably will still give it a go. But yeah, I think I will have to drastically lower my expectations for the game.
What about you, Mark? What have you been playing?
Lewis, I've finished Persona 5.
Oh, hey!
It's been 125 hours. 125 hours
grief.
for a single player game. I'm pretty confident in saying that is the longest narrative in a game I have ever played. 125 hours. I honestly kept on thinking that it was going to finish, and it just kept going and going and going. And you know what? I fucking loved it. It was really, really good. It was really good. As I said on our Twitter, it felt like the ending of a TV series. I think that a lot of gaming experiences, even relatively long ones, are more akin to like finishing a movie. Like at the end of the movie, you sort of decompress from it, you know, but you don't have the same time investment of like season after season after season of watching a TV series. And I compared it to Mad Men before, and I do think that is an apt comparison still, because it is all about the characters. If you are not getting invested in these characters and their stories and their backgrounds, this game is not for you. Like, it's not for you at all. Or if you find that you are not connecting with anyone in the game early doors, back out, because it's 120 hours of just that. But honestly, it felt to me like the end of one of these really long-running series like Mad Men or Breaking Bad or The Sopranos or something like that, like the decompression after it was like, oh man, there's no more of this. Like, what will I do in the evenings now when I'm not playing Persona 5? You know, yeah, I really enjoyed it, man. I really did enjoy it. I would still really struggle to recommend it to a lot of people just because of the nature of the game that it is, and for how long it is, obviously, as well as an absolutely gigantic time commitment. If you think about how many other games you could have played in that time, like at least 3, I would have thought, you know. It's a difficult one to recommend, but if you are in any way interested in it, don't hesitate. And if you are willing to put that time into it, because you do have to sink that time into it, it really is worth it, man. Like, I really enjoyed it in the end. Like, I really did.
Nice one. It's good to know that you've come out of the other side and feel like that, because I remember at early doors you were kind of saying you were enjoying it, but maybe not quite as much as some of the hype had led you to think that you might or whatever. But
well, this is the thing. Like, people were saying, oh, like, this is one of my favourite games of all time, and when I started playing it, I was like, how? Now I completely understand why people would say that this is one of their favourite games ever, because if you connect with those characters in a big way, it absolutely could be, and I'm not trying to deny anyone that. For me, it's not at that level personally, just in terms of like the mechanics and stuff like that, and it sort of just is the same thing for 125 hours. that sounds like such a negative, but it's not really. It never felt like a drag, despite all that time, despite all the time that I put into it. The story was always moving forward, it always felt as if you were working towards a goal. It was never a drag to me, which seems remarkable because it was 125 hours, Liz. It was 125 hours, and it never seemed like a drag, which I think is high praise, actually.
In fairness, that is, to not have got bored of something after that length of time, it must be doing something right, even if it isn't for every gamer,
Can I tell you something? Now that you've said that, I had the maddest of thoughts, which was, should I start Persona 5 Royal? I genuinely had that thought, but I thought, no, that's madness. Like, you can't do that immediately after finishing the first one. You can't do another 125 hours of this. But that thought did cross my mind, because I was like, you know what? I would happily keep playing this. I would happily just continue this story.
Yeah, good stuff, man.
And also, I have finished Super Mario 3D World, like the main game.
Nice.
You get the ultra hard world at the end, obviously, like all Mario games. I ventured into the first level, decided nope, and went all the way back out to the main menu and jumped into Bowser's Fury, the extension to the game that came along with the Switch release, which is
nice,
this.
at last.
Yeah, at last. My apologies for not getting around to this sooner, ladies and gentlemen. And to be fair, actually, I've not played a huge amount of it, to be brutally honest with everyone, but for the short amount of time that I've spent in Bowser's Fury, it's quite a thing, actually. For anyone wondering, would like a truly open world Mario game work? From the short amount of time that I've played it, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, you could easily make an open world Mario game and have it work. The world is bigger than I thought it was going to be, just as like a sort of bolt-on bit of DLC, effectively. But if you think of it on an even bigger scale again, like, there's no reason why it shouldn't work,
Yeah.
I must admit, the kaiju battles so far have been coming around more frequently than I would like. Bowser sort of interrupting what I'm trying to do more often than I would like him to be completely honest with you. I sort of thought that would be fairly intermittent, but it's not. It's actually quite consistent.
Yeah.
He seems to be coming up in my business fairly frequently.
I think I heard it was like every 5 minutes, which does sound like way too much.
Yeah, that's way too much. In terms of this actual game, honestly, that is actually detracting from it quite a bit, because it's like, oh no, now it's Bowser. And then there's these specific blocks that you have to get the kaiju Bowser to attack for you to get certain things as well, which either means that you have to rush to it when he's going mental, or you have to wait until he goes mental and you just need to stand by the boxes that you need to wait for him to explode as well, which is just annoying, you know what I mean? Like, if that stuff was like way less frequent, I think I would be enjoying it more than I actually am. However, in terms of like an open world Mario game, which this is obviously like dipping its toe in basically, those aspects of it totally work.
Nice, that's good to hear. Yeah, just the concept, the exploration within Mario being put into an open world is so interesting to me. I think if there's things to work out about this game, that's fair enough, but if the core idea works, I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah, again, the world is sort of slightly gated, I would say. Like, you can't just go everywhere all at once just now. I think that is probably how it would scale up as well. Like, I think if they did go all out and decide we're going to do a fully open world Mario game, they probably would do something like that as well, sort of gate it in some capacity, so that you can't just go everywhere all at once. I mean, basically, it just works. It does just work. And I think that it's an idea that they should explore if they're not already thinking about it, which I'm sure they are if they've introduced this in the first place. I would happily see a Mario game in this vein, really.
Good stuff. Glad to hear it.
All right, listen, with that, time for the news. Alright, news item number 1. As we discussed last week, Lewis, Xbox's $7.5 billion takeover of Bethesda was made official, and as we briefly mentioned as well, Xbox were likely to have a presentation during the week last week, and they did. Let's cut right to the chase, Lewis. Exclusivity was addressed almost immediately and very directly by Phil Spencer, who said this.
Obviously, I can't sit here and say every Bethesda game is an Xbox exclusive, because we know that's not true. There's contractual obligations that we're going to see through. We have games that exist on other platforms, and we're going to go and support those games on the platforms they're on. There's communities of players. We love those communities and will continue to invest in them. And even in the future, there might be either contractual things or legacy on different platforms that we'll go do. But if you're an Xbox customer, the thing I want you to know is this is about delivering great exclusive games for you that ship on platforms where Game Pass exists. And that's our goal. That's why we're doing this. That's the root of this partnership that we're building. And the creative capability we'll be able to bring to market for Xbox customers is going to be the best it's ever been for Xbox after we're done here.
This is about delivering great exclusive games that ship on platforms where Games Pass exists. So that is Xbox, that is PC, and that is most certainly not PlayStation. And very unlikely to be Switch as well, let's be honest. Now, Lewis, I hate to say I told you so, but I am going to say that just now. Basically, I don't think that there's any other way to read that statement apart from they are going to fulfill their contractual obligations, e.g. Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop will still be PlayStation exclusives for their timed exclusivity deal, whatever it is, a year or whatever. They will continue to support legacy Bethesda games on other platforms, so Doom Eternal on PlayStation isn't going anywhere. Any of the Doom stuff that's been ported to Switch isn't going anywhere. But going forward, Bethesda games are going to be exclusive to Xbox and PC.
Yeah, it would seem so. That's the only real takeaway you can get from Phil Spencer's statement here. I think that there is still a hedging of the bets in some senses where he says things like, and even in the future, there might be other things, contractual things, those are his words, could mean something like the upcoming Machine Games Indiana Jones project. You know, for example, that could still have contractual things which mean it could be in other places. But yeah, categorically, it does seem like they're saying that buying Bethesda has been about making things exclusive to Game Pass, and yeah, so I guess we have to look at that now and say it looks like Fallout, it looks like Starfield, it looks like Elder Scrolls and other games like them will be Xbox exclusives in future, which, yeah, is huge. It is an enormous thing, there's no doubt about it.
It's an interesting thing that you bring up with the Indiana Jones stuff because that, as you said, contractually, depending on when that deal was done, is with Bethesda, not Xbox, correct? Which means that potentially they signed a contract for a multi-platform game.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I mean, we don't know that about other already announced Bethesda projects. I mean, I would assume that something like Starfield hasn't been tied down to any particular marketing deals yet or anything like that. But if there is some paperwork there that says it's coming to PlayStation and that's an agreement, then that could still be affected. But I would think that it's going to be a much more case-by-case basis from here on in, that there could be certain games where there happen to be things in place. But broadly speaking, it looks like exclusives, yeah.
Yeah, I must admit, I would be very surprised if Starfield, if The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, the next Doom, the next Wolfenstein, any of that appear on PlayStation. Like, I genuinely would at this point, particularly after Phil Spencer's statement there. And to be fair to Phil Spencer, obviously as a PlayStation fan, that is not exactly the statement I wanted to hear, but he was very direct about it. He said what he had to say, and I think that was a good way to go about it, you know?
Is there a good reason, though, that he hasn't been forthcoming about it up till now? That's what I can't get my head around.
Well, yes, there is, because the deal wasn't official, and they legally, none of them could legally talk about it. They did actually mention that right at the beginning of the, what were they calling it, a roundhouse or whatever?
A round table,
between the Xbox guys and the Bethesda guys. They sort of did mention that at the beginning, that legally they couldn't really say a lot about this, like, and people were like bombarding them with questions and they're like, we can't say anything. So I like that now that they had this opportunity to say something, Phil Spencer at least was very direct about that question in particular, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that that's actually an important question to be answered for gamers at wide, but also Xbox gamers, you know?
Yeah, it's the fundamental question.
Well, yeah, I guess it is. There wasn't actually anything mentioned about specific games, but both Xbox and Bethesda confirmed that they will be doing showcases in the summer. Whether or not that ties in with E3, we don't know yet. But honestly, considering how Xbox and Microsoft have got behind E3 in the past, I think there's a pretty good chance that they do align with E3. And if they do, that's very good news for E3, who need all the help they can get, I think. But, as predicted, Lewis, they did announce a whole host of Bethesda games coming to Games Pass, which include Dishonored 1, Dishonored 2, Doom, Doom 2, Doom 3, Doom 64, Doom Eternal, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, The Elder Scrolls Online, The Evil Within, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, Fallout New Vegas, Prey, Rage 2, Wolfenstein The New Order, Wolfenstein The Old Blood, and Wolfenstein Youngbloods. Which is a hell of a lot of very high-profile games lists, which are all just available on Games Pass now. It was also announced yesterday that Dishonored, Skyrim, Fallout 4, Fallout 76 and Prey would be taking advantage of the FPS boost feature on the Series X and S, which in itself was only announced last month. It's a system level feature that allows Xbox One games to run at up to 4 times their original frame rate on the Series X and the Series S without any input or very little input from the devs, which is incredibly impressive and a really cool backwards compatibility feature. Mm-hmm. And it was also announced just today that Outriders, Undertale, Yakuza 6, Narita Boy, Empire of Sin, which I know Lewis Camley was very interested in, Star Wars Squadrons, Octopath Traveler, which is a game that I played quite a lot, Genesis Noir, Nier Automata, which is a fantastic game, Touchlight 3, Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, and Supraland are all coming to Games Pass as well. And leaving, just while we're completing this, I suppose, and leaving Games Pass is Hyperdot, Journey to the Savage Planet, and Machinarium. Solus, with all this Bethesda stuff and Xbox continuing to add a whole host of really very good games indeed to Games Pass, I think we're now past the point where it is difficult to ignore Games Pass, and I think Games Pass is coming up and slapping you in the face and screaming at you that you need to be involved in Games Pass or you're missing out, you know? It's sort of got to that point now, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. The question that kind of ran through my mind over the last week or so as these various announcements were falling on top of one another was, if you are an Xbox gamer, is there any argument not to be a subscriber other than pure finance if you can't afford it, and that's another thing altogether. But if you have the means to get Game Pass, has anyone chosen not to? Because the offer there is so big now.
It's so ludicrously good value for money. It's difficult to imagine someone turning it down.
Yeah, for me now, looking at Game Pass, there's so much variety there. I think Game Pass can be kind of all things to all people in a way. Now, by adding these Bethesda games, it has obviously got some of the biggest franchises and biggest IPs in gaming, and it's put some of those games in there. Something like Skyrim being effectively kind of free to play for people. Imagine that when Skyrim came out, how enormous that was. If someone told you, in about 10 years' time, that will be available to you in the same way that Breaking Bad is available to you on Netflix, it's unthinkable, right? On top of that, then you just listed some other games like Undertale, like Supraland, like Empire of Sin, that are smaller games with different kind of ambitions, really. And they're there too, and they're there for players who aren't really bothered about these enormous Bethesda shooters, but are looking for something else. There's just, across the board, there's such a depth and such a breadth of games on Game Pass now that, like you say, if you're not on it and you have the means to be on it, I cannot understand why you aren't looking at it.
Yeah, the attachment rate has to be huge, right? It has to be absolutely massive.
Yeah, and climbing, surely, I think it's even interesting that Phil Spencer used that phrase, platforms where Game Pass exists. Is that a phrase that is now going to supersede it's on Xbox? It's like that in itself is it's a shift in how we even look at how games work,
I actually thought that the wording of that was very interesting as well, because he didn't say Xbox and PC or like Windows platforms or something like or Microsoft platforms or anything like that. He specifically said where Games Pass exists. The focus is just moved away from the physical console of the Xbox or gaming on PC or anything like that. The focus is entirely on getting you subscribed to Games Pass. It doesn't matter if they're doing that through the console or through PC or through your phone now as well. Like something I never even mentioned is that the vast majority of those Bethesda games you'll be able to play on the cloud on your phone right now, which is incredible.
Yeah.
They don't care where you come in from. As long as you're subscribed to Games Pass, that is all they care about. When they put an offer in front of you that is that good, fucking fair play to them. Fair play to them. I would be pimping this as much as possible as well. Alright, Lewis, news item number 2. Square Enix has announced that they will be holding their very own Nintendo Direct style showcase called Square Enix Presents, and it will be on March the 18th, which is the day this podcast comes out. And in typical fashion will mean that you, dear listener, may very well know more about what we are about to talk about than we do. Apparently, the presentation will be around 40 minutes long and will include Outriders, which we just said was coming to Games Pass and is coming out on April the 1st. Seems to have had a relatively successful beta, so I can't really imagine that there's going to be a huge amount about that. Balan Wonderland, which is a new platformer by the creators of Sonic, which is also coming out very soon on the 26th of March. Lewis, you were telling me this game looked terrible. I basically don't really know much about it, though.
Yeah, I think it's got quite a lot of pedigree in terms of who's making it. It's got real kind
Sonic
of
guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's people that you would trust, but everything I've heard about it, they put out a free demo that was really quite heavily panned in a lot of quarters. It sounds like it's just like, this is one thing I heard, that every single button just is a jump button. That's all you can do. I don't know if that's true. I haven't played it, but it sounds like a big old mess. So let's see how they spin that one.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. It will also include Tomb Raider as well, the continued celebration of the 25th anniversary of the games. It has been leaked, though, through the Microsoft Store that it looks as if we're going to be getting a Tomb Raider Definitive Survival Trilogy, which is the last 3 games by Square Enix. And the release date attached to that leak was March the 18th, which suggests that they were going to shadow drop it at this event. It has also been announced that Lara Croft will be part of the Fortnite Chapter 2 Season 6 Battle Pass as well, because, I mean, if your game isn't part of Fortnite, it doesn't even exist, you know?
And especially if you've got a new game to sell.
Well, yeah, that's also very, very important. Nice marketplace Fortnite these days, isn't it? It was also quite cool as well, like they had various different skins of Lara Croft. One from was like from the PS1 era, and then there was one that was very much in line with like the other Fortnite-y looking characters, and then there was the one from the recent Square Enix games as well, which I just thought was a nice touch. Marvel's Avengers will also be included and will add Hawkeye to the game, and it will be receiving a PS5 and Series X upgrade, but to be honest, I think that it might be too little too late for that game. I'm really not sure how many people are still going to be playing it and how many people are really going to care that they can now play as Hawkeye.
Yeah, certainly not about playing as Hawkeye. I can't see anyone that's particularly excited about that.
I don't know, man, like those Marvel fanboys, like some of them absolutely love these minor characters, and I'm just like, I've never even heard of that person.
It's all got to be about when Spider-Man comes to on the PlayStation exclusive content, right? Like that's
well,
what
that'll be an interesting one, won't it? They will also be announcing an update on Just Cause Mobile, and they will also be announcing another mobile game. I think there's a pretty good chance that that other mobile game is also Tomb Raider related, personally. But, I mean, that could be anything, and let's face it, mobile games don't really go down very well at these presentations, do they? And Taito will also have a showcase, and if you don't know who Taito is, I didn't either, and I had to look them up, but they made Space Invaders back in the day and are apparently a sister company of Square Enix these days. I would expect this to be very focused on the Japanese market, judging by the previous titles that they released, so I maybe wouldn't be expecting a huge amount from this personally. I certainly am not. But Lewis, all of that aside, the big announcement is that they will be showing off a new Life is Strange game, which I am very excited about. I'm very excited about this indeed. Firstly, I wonder if this new Life is Strange game will be more like Before the Storm, a sort of spin-off of Life is Strange 2 rather than Life is Strange 3, you know?
Yeah, it definitely could be. I mean, you've played the game Life is Strange 2, so I don't know how it ends. Like, when you got to that end point, did you feel like there was room for that to expand? I mean, obviously Before the Storm is sort of, it doesn't follow on from the original game, right? So I guess it could spin off in other directions, but is that contained in it?
Not for the two brothers. Like, I don't think that there is a spin-off that involves the two brothers, but they meet such a host of interesting characters along the way, you know, is that any one of them could have had a spin-off. It's like Chris from The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit as well, like the prequel spin-off, if you like, in the game. There's loads of characters like that you could easily have a whole other game about, you know, from various episodes. So I'd be very interested to see if this is going to be a Before the Storm-esque spin-off, or if it is actually going to be the full Life is Strange 3. I would be fully game for both, to be completely clear. Secondly, I wonder if they move away from their episodic release, which has been a staple of the Life is Strange series so far. They now have big investment from Tencent, you will remember from, I think that was last year at some point that happened. So maybe now that they've got that Tencent money, they don't need to do an episodic release, and quite frankly, I would welcome it.
Yeah, it's unclear whether the episodic thing is an artistic choice as well, if that's something that they actually want to do, but yeah, I don't think it worked by and large. I think some people will be playing them episodically, but it does feel like anecdotally at least, a lot of people wait until every part is out and binge on it as they would do with any other game, and it might be better for them just to release a full game that everyone talks about in those terms, and can enjoy together.
I mean, that's basically how I enjoy it as well. To be clear, I think that the episodic release was done out of necessity originally. I think that they were trying to generate more money so that they could continue the rest of the development of the game, basically. But now that they have quite serious investment from Tencent, it looks like anyway, and I would hope Square Enix as well, I'm not really sure that the episodic release is necessary, and also I think that the industry in general has sort of moved away from that a little bit, and I think that we just want those full titles because, I mean, as you said, I always wait until all the episodes are out so that I can play it through all at one time. I always feel semi-guilty about that because I'm thinking to myself, do they need the money from these individual episodes to create the next episode as best they can, But with Tencent investment, they really shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, even with Square's money, they shouldn't really need that.
Well, yeah. Alright, Lewis, news item number 3. It has been announced just hours ago, Lewis, that industry veteran Jade Raymond has opened her own independent studio in Montreal with investment from Sony. This comes just months after she parted ways with Google Stadia after they shut down their internal video game development. The studio will be called Haven Entertainment Studios, and it will work on an original new IP for PlayStation. For those that don't know, Raymond has worked on a huge number of AAA games throughout her career, starting on the first 3 Assassin's Creed games, back when Assassin's Creed was interesting. She also worked on Splinter Cell Blacklist. She also worked on the original Watch Dogs. She eventually went to EA, where she was supposed to be making the Star Wars game Project Ragtag with Amy Hennig, but ultimately that got cancelled. Then she went to Google and Stadia, and then that whole situation totally fell apart. So she's not had a great run recently, I would say, but definitely a talent, and definitely very, very interesting that she's now associated with PlayStation, or at least for me it is anyway. Jade Raymond has made this statement regarding the announcement.
I could not be more excited about this opportunity to return to my roots and work with this talented team to create a new IP together. Launching an independent studio with the backing of Sony Interactive Entertainment gives us full freedom to push boundaries with the support of a publisher that deeply understands the creative process of making games and is known for exceptional quality and a player-first approach.
And head of PlayStation Studios, Herman Hulst, has made this statement.
Sony Interactive Entertainment is proud to support and invest in Haven and its future. We understand the challenges and rewards of building creative teams from the ground up, as does Jade with her wealth of experience helming many of gaming's biggest franchises. We're confident in and excited for the bright future of Haven Studios and its first project currently in development.
So, as I was alluding to not so subtly, I think that this is pretty awesome for PlayStation. Although she has definitely had a few misses in the past, like she also worked on Battlefront 2 and things like that when she was at EA, and we all know how that went, and the original Watch Dogs was a big swing and a miss. But Jade Raymond is someone who is definitely capable of making incredibly, incredibly good games, and there are very few people on the planet that you can say that about. I am hoping that being free from the shackles of working for companies the size of EA and Ubisoft and Google can just let the creativity flow to a certain extent and just make something great, I will be very interested to see what the scale of this game is, because Jade Raymond has made AAA games her entire career. So I'm wondering if this investment from Sony is for them to find their next big title, or whether we should be expecting something more AA than AAA,
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it is at that kind of AA level because it's a first project and the start of a new IP for PlayStation. But you've got to look at that and think, if that lands, if that does well, if it looks like it could build into something bigger, then yeah, they would be investing even further in Haven to make it a AAA studio. Do they eventually even bring that in-house? Potentially. It does feel like quite a smart strategy here from Sony, who can't do the acquisition process that Xbox does. They simply don't have the cash to do that. But if they can find these innovative smaller studios, or help people get off the ground with their own studios and put money in them and get them working on titles that are exclusive to PlayStation, then you build a big family of interesting game makers, and that's great for PlayStation gamers.
Yeah, absolutely. See, to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this game was AAA, or at least very close to being something AAA. And I think that if this goes well, like you said there, Lewis, I think there's a very good chance that PlayStation buy this studio in 3 to 5 years, say, which is really, really cool. All right, let's finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1 has been revealed this week that at least one, but likely more, EA employees have been selling rare FIFA Ultimate Team players to gamers for hundreds, if not thousands of euros. These FIFA Ultimate Team players are usually gained through the, frankly, awful microtransaction system in FIFA, it should be said. However, EA has launched an investigation into what is going on here, and they have made this statement.
It appears that one or more EA accounts, which were either compromised or being used inappropriately by someone within EA, directly entitled items to these individual accounts. The alleged behaviour is unacceptable, and in no way do we condone granting or purchasing player items in exchange for money. This practice runs counter to the game's competitive integrity, is a violation of EA's user agreement, and is not something we tolerate. We do not allow the trade or sale of items outside our game for many reasons, including that it would create an unequal playing field for our community. Regardless of these actions, we appreciate how concerning this is to all of our players, and we apologise for the impact of these improper grants within the community. We also appreciate how extremely annoying and frustrating it is that this practice might have come from within EA. We're angry too. We know that the trust of our communities is hard-earned and is based on principles of fair play. This illicit activity shakes that trust. We've also been clear since the creation of Ultimate Team that items cannot be exchanged outside our game, and that's key to how we keep our game safe from manipulation and bad actors. This is a breach of that principle as well, and we won't let it stand.
Yeah, this is fucking shit, Lewis. I don't really know what to say about this. Now, I am in no way trying to defend this fucking prick, right? What this guy is doing here is near extorting people for money. It's absolutely shocking, quite frankly, and the prices are outrageous. However, if you are implementing aggressive microtransactions into your game, which FIFA absolutely is, and it is some of the worst microtransactions still, it sort of breeds this kind of thing, I think. Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, as you were saying to me just before we started recording, I'm sort of surprised this thing hasn't happened more often.
Yeah, I mean, what you're seeing here is the effect of having a highly addictive gameplay mechanic, essentially. A thing that people want, a thing that people might have to pay for, but, you know, this highly, highly popular mode that millions of people are playing, that seemingly now the system can be gamed and you can get around the rules of it, essentially, by paying people even more money. It is a surprise to me in a way that there hasn't been more issues like this. I think it's a bold, strong statement from EA. Hopefully they don't have anything to do with it really, and it is just a bad actor within the company, and that happens, and I don't think you can blame EA for that. But yeah, maybe it should be a bit of a wake-up that they are helping to create the situations by which people want to exploit this kind of thing, you know, both from the guy selling it side and the people paying the money for it. You know, they should not have any reason to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say, on EA's statement, they do go on about fair play. The game is more fair to those that pay into their microtransaction system than it is to those that don't. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. Shout out number 2. Former Silent Hill director Kenshiro Toyama says he is collaborating with an unnamed, quotes, famous creator in Japan. Toyama announced in December that he was parting ways with Sony's Japan studio and forming Bokeh Game Studios. And it seemed a lot of the former Japan studios employees have followed them there as well. This is obviously before PlayStation started winding down Japan studios, and clearly these people saw that the writing was on the wall. So once he said this statement, because of his background with Silent Hill, immediately speculation jumped to the fabled Silent Hill reboot, and the famous person could be Kojima, of course. But honestly, I really don't think that this is Silent Hill, because he also mentioned in the same interview that he intends for his game to be set around cities in Asia, and that to me just doesn't sound like Silent Hill. Not to say that it couldn't be, but it just very much does not sound like Silent Hill to me. I actually think that it might be more likely that he's collaborating on Kojima on whatever horror game he's working on, because I also don't believe that he's working on Silent Hill, than Toyama is working on Silent Hill through this new company, you know?
Yeah, it's obviously hard to say with any certainty just now. It's great to know that something could be coming, some kind of interesting collaboration nonetheless is in place. I mean, it would be amazing if it was Kojima, but, you know, there's plenty of other people that it could be that would also be pretty exciting, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, man. As you said, it could be literally anyone. There was also a bit of debate about the translation of this as well.
Yeah.
There was another translation that saw the statement saying more that it would be someone who everyone would be happy with rather than someone who is famous. Although, is that an idiom? I don't know. But
Yeah.
I know that translating from Japanese to English can sometimes be more of an art than a science.
Definitely, yeah.
So, we'll see, but it's very interesting to know all the same. Alright, shout out number 3. The Taiwanese horror game Devotion is back on sale directly from developers Red Candle Games. This is 2 years after it was originally removed from Steam for the game having a line in it or something that mocked Chinese President Xi Jinping for looking like Winnie the Pooh. This man is clearly so unbelievably thin-skinned if he can't stand up to that level of a joke. Jesus Christ. It was also announced last year that Devotion would be coming to GOG, but GOG mysteriously done a 180 on this after the game was announced, and the game actually ended up never being listed on GOG at all. I mean, let's be fucking frank here. The reason that this game was removed from Steam and from GOG is because of pressure from the Chinese government that they did not want this game to go on sale because it had the most feeble joke towards their grand leader. But Lewis, it's a happy ending, I think anyway, because at long last the game is actually available for sale, DRM free from the devs themselves, and I'm going to fucking buy it.
Nice one, yeah. Good to show a bit of support for a game that's obviously been through quite a lot of trouble in its time, but yeah, I'd be interested to see if it's actually any good.
Well, this is the thing as well, is that it has actually supposed to be pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So I have absolutely no problem paying for it at all. And also, horror games, Lewis, me and you have discussed this a little bit off the podcast, but it's been something that I've sort of been looking to get into as well.
Yeah.
And do you know what? This could be a good start.
Nice one, yeah.
All right, Lewis. Time for a beer, and then we'll be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our unpopular gaming opinions list. Now, I saw this trending on Twitter earlier today, and against my better judgment, jumped into that hashtag. Among the detritus list, the only thing that I found interesting was some of the gaming opinions that randomly popped up in it. So I thought, do you know what? Bit of fun. I don't want this to devolve into having like big arguments or anything. Just bit of fun. Some unpopular gaming opinions that might upset a few people. Listen. I will kick off, because this was my idea, with my hottest take, my most controversial gaming opinion.
Here we go.
I'm going to qualify this quite a lot before I say it as well.
Coward.
I completely understand that the Mario series of games is one of the most important, if not the most important series of video games ever made, possibly. However, I think that after Mario 64, basically all Mario games have been a bit overrated. That doesn't mean I think that they're bad, because I thought Mario 3D World was awesome, actually. But it wasn't like the greatest game that's ever happened to the world. And actually, in terms of platformers, see, things like Celeste are better than most Mario games, I would say. And again, I know that that is exceptionally controversial to a lot of people, but I think that there's just a huge amount of nostalgia and whatever wrapped up in Mario games as well. Again, I am 100% not saying that Mario games after Mario 64 are bad or anything like that. I just think that they are, honestly, like, they're quite one-dimensional. They sort of just are what they are. They're good fun, and that is fucking great, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but they sort of just are a 2D or 3D, depending on what game you're playing, platformer, and that's sort of that. Rebuttal.
I mean, you've built enough space into that there that it takes some of the edge off of what you're saying, but...
Well, I felt that I had to, Liz, quite frankly. I felt as if I might get lynched in the street otherwise.
I think it's... I mean, it kind of just depends how you look at that. I think Mario, like you say, is enormously important, and of the games that I've played, I've enjoyed them. I would say that of the 3D games in particular before Odyssey that I've played, to me, they don't quite live up to Odyssey, and I think that maybe indicates something here, that a lot of people's perspective on Mario is actually about nostalgia, and it's about what they played when they were younger, and it's about what franchises have kind of stuck with them.
Yeah, totally, and that's 100% valid, by the way,
of
for
course
anyone.
It is, yeah.
Like, 100%, definitely.
I think, like, I would maybe change the word overrated for something else, you know, that they aren't quite what they were, you know, certainly when we've gone back...
I think that that's actually interesting, because I think that they are almost exactly what they were. My point is almost that they are still the same as they ever were, but back then that was pushing boundaries. Like, Mario 64 was an absolute game changer when it came to creating a 3D world and traversing a 3D world. But the Mario games aren't doing that now. They're being good, fun games, but they're not game-changing games.
Yeah,
you know?
they're not all changing the world, but I don't think any... I mean, if we're going to go down a list of games that haven't really moved the needle in terms of really changing things, there's some pretty big hitters in there, I would say. But, you know, each one of them is fundamentally good fun, enjoyable, good to play. Literally, you know, every Mario game feels good and
like, yeah,
that.
Nintendo seal of approval and all that.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't disagree with you as well that it doesn't necessarily mean that Mario is the best platformer, you know, in all cases. I think, you know, Celeste is a better platformer than most of the 2D Mario games that I've played, but it's trying to be a different thing, obviously, because it's, you know, a lot more difficult and stuff like that. So, I take your point, I see your opinion. Yeah, I mean, I don't love every Mario game. I've not played a lot of them. I think that's where that comes into for you and I, is that we are actually looking at a lot of Mario games in the rearview mirror, and they don't feel as good, and they don't play as well, and they don't feel as impactful as they might have done had we been playing them back in, you know, 2006 or whenever. But yeah, overall, I think that you're probably right. They aren't really changing things the way that they once did, but still good games, definitely.
Still good games. I'm not denying that they're good games. They're just a bit overrated in my opinion. Anyway, we've spent too long speaking about this already, Liz. What is one of your unpopular gaming opinions?
I'll throw kind of two that I had written here that are sort of related to what you were just saying, and I'll put them together and put them out here. That is that I think it is okay, and we have to be accepting that it is fine for franchises and studios and publishers to die, to go away. And I want to just be very clear that I don't mean it's good for anyone's job to be lost or anything like that. Absolutely not. But I do think that as a culture, gaming, we love nostalgia, and we will not kill our darlings. And we're seeing that so much just now that old games are being remade, they're being rebooted, they're getting trilogy remakes put out that are preceding, you know, a new installment in that franchise or whatever. And some of them, obviously I'm kind of mentioning things like Mass Effect there, and that's not to say that any one of themselves aren't good, but I just think that we clamour all the time for a new sequel or a new reboot of franchises that we used to love, when we should be, as a young art form, we should be more excited about things growing and changing, and actually seeing things like people leaving Japan Studio to go off and form their own companies, or Jade Raymond now setting up her own company. That is a much healthier culture than what we often see in gaming. And just to put a very specific pin into that, and it ties quite nicely to Mario, is that I think Sonic is not any good and should now be effectively retired as a kind of headline gaming franchise.
Savage. Oh my god, absolutely savage. Now, I think that you should qualify that as well, because some of the original Sonic games were fucking awesome. However, I'm not sure that there has been a very good Sonic game, or certainly nowhere near that level of good for a very long time, to be honest with you. I probably agree with that overall.
I think what I sort of basically mean is that Sonic belongs to the 90s and does not work anymore, and it's staggered on for quite some time, but those original games were great fun for sure, but it just doesn't really have anything anymore. I think there are better mascots out there, there are better platform games by country miles, and yeah, it's just one of those things that has stuck around gaming, I think, beyond its time.
To be honest with you, Lewis, I don't even disagree. I really don't. I think that I mean, I know that intermittently there has been the odd good Sonic game here and there, but like by and large, since those sort of original ones, particularly the first three, I think, man, it's been pretty bleak, isn't it? But they keep on bringing them back for the dead. I do completely understand what you're saying there, man, I've got to admit. Okay, is it my turn again then?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I think things like Rage Mode in the Tekken games and X-Rays in the Mortal Kombat games are bad for fighting games and quite often cheapen a victory. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that about like super high-end play, because quite frankly, I don't know enough about it. I don't really know if they think it's good or bad or indifferent. But in terms of like the casual gamer, the type of person that is most likely to be playing this, the difference in skill is rarely going to be that great that it basically isn't going to be determined by whether or not you hit your X-rays on Mortal Kombat. And the same thing goes with Tekken and Rage Mode, and you know how much I hate Rage Mode and Tekken, Lost.
Oh, I do.
I've moaned at you for years about Rage Mode and Tekken, which is where if you get down to the last like 10% of your health or something, like, so you've got barely any health bar left, you suddenly get like double damage to all your moves, which means that you could be playing a really strategic match and like chipping away and chipping away and chipping away at their health, and you've got to this last bit, and then you've made a mistake or something like that, and then they've hit out with one like absolute cracker of a combo, and you're just done, and that's that. You know what I mean? Just because you've got double damage on this enormous combo, and it's just bullshit. It just like completely takes away from the competitiveness, I think, of fighting games.
Yeah, I mean, I know specifically why you hate rage mode. That reason is me quite often, but
yes, it is.
But yeah, I don't disagree with this at all. Do you know, the thing is, I'll throw this out as one of mine as well. Not that I had actually thought about it too much in advance, but there's something here about games, particularly long-running franchises, which feel like they've got to iterate and develop and basically add new stuff to each game to make it worthwhile for someone to buy. And maybe there's actually data that bears that out, that people aren't willing to pay for things if it doesn't feel like it's iterated. But to me, both of those games and plenty others like them should at the absolute minimum include gameplay settings toggles to turn that stuff off so that you can play these games that you've been playing for 20 odd years the way that you like to play them and that you've got used to playing them. And if you look at what Smash does, like Smash allows you to set up all of your rules basically however you want. You can play that game in so many different ways, and I cannot fathom why, particularly when you're not playing online, games like Tekken and Mortal Kombat won't let you just play it however you want, turn those things on and off as you see fit.
I would agree with that 100%. I would definitely like to see, at the very least, a fucking toggle. Do you hear that, Bandai Namco and NetherRealm? Just a toggle is all I need.
I think my next one might not be super controversial, but it is one that I think about a hell of a lot. That is that I think most games are too long. And
interesting.
I am saying that obviously to the man who's just sunk 125 hours into one game.
Yeah, I have done that, yeah.
It's probably not even the longest in that series.
Actually, as the longest in the series. Disqualified that, yep. I think Persona 4 Golden gets close, but Persona 5 is longer.
It's longer. Well, fair enough. To me, obviously, there's a lot of long games, and it's not a new thing to suggest that something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey is really an enormous and probably over-long video game. But to me, I think that a lot of games, I think even a lot of games that other people, maybe yourself included, would consider short, actually at times artificially lengthening themselves by the way that they stagger upgrades, by the way that they use repetitive story beats or have whole sections of story that are basically throwaway. You know, if something happens and it becomes irrelevant later on that happened. You know, the game that comes to mind just now, and it's a phenomenal game, and this is not to say that long games are ruined in and of themselves, but The Witcher 3 is a long game which I eventually gave up on, and I know a lot of people gave up on The Witcher, particularly in their initial playthroughs. It was a game that a lot of people seem to go back to over time. But that to me just felt like it was trying to get you to grind quite a lot. It obviously had a lot of story to tell, and that is great. It had real depth, and in some ways it's not a great example of what I'm saying because of that. But it just meant that you were just in this one world for so long, and I think for a lot of gamers still, gaming is still like a 2 or 3 hour, 4 hour a night habit. It's not something that they can easily do 120 hours in one game of without getting bored or wanting to play something else, without feeling like they're missing out, you know. And I would just like to see the return of some games, you know, that are priced appropriately and all that as well, that are kind of just maxing out at that 15 hour mark, possibly less even, because you'd get smaller, innovative ideas explored quickly, and then you can move on to other things. And I think that we might have a slightly healthier gaming culture because of that.
That's really, really interesting. And I would say that an excellent example of what you were talking about, particularly artificially lengthening games, is actually Death Stranding, because every single animation in that is painfully slow. It is painfully slow. That game will not be rushed. Red Dead Redemption 2 is another thing as well. The game is unapologetically slow, you know what I mean? Purely because, like, literally its animations are slow, and everything takes time to do. However, Lewis, my next unpopular opinion actually ties into this quite nicely. I actually think that playtime should have absolutely no bearing whatsoever on how much a game sells for, which is something that you were sort of at least pulling at that thread a little bit there. To be honest, it seems to be the same crowd that complains that something like Gone Home is too much money because it's not a very long game. And yet when they get an Assassin's Creed, which can be, I mean, talking about me putting 125 hours into that game, you could be playing Assassin's Creed, some of the more recent ones, Odyssey, Origins, Valhalla, you can probably be playing that for over 200 hours, probably quite comfortably, I would have thought. And the same crowd seem to be moaning that paying $70 for that game is too much then. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It should be priced according to the development. You know what I mean? Like, is this hitting the upper bracket, basically, of how much it costs to make a video game, and therefore is it justifiably a AAA price, basically? Even if the game is 10 hours long, is 20 hours long, is 120 hours long, if you're hitting that upper echelon bracket in terms of what you are producing in terms of quality, it just doesn't matter how long the game is. The price per minutes played is just a fraction that I'm not interested in. I just don't care. You know what I mean? I only care, is it a good experience or is it not a good experience? Because I'll happily pay more money for something that is a good experience and it only be 4 hours long than pay for some AAA game that is bloated and artificially long and just stuffing itself to try and meet some quota of a game length that is expected of it, you know what I mean? Rather than just making the game the way that it should be made, basically, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that should be a controversial opinion, but sadly it basically is, because that is the way that so many people look at games and how much to value them. Because, yeah, I think that you're right. It should come down to development costs. It should come down to other considerations because, as you were sort of indicating there, what happens when you directly equate length to price is that developers and publishers will just insist that their game be made longer to fulfill that so that they can say on the market and so that on How Long to Beat, when the game launches, people go, oh, yeah, that's 40 hours or that's 60 hours, that's worth my money. But what you're not seeing there is, like, is this game actually interesting? Is it one idea spread very thin over a long time? What is it that we're actually valuing when we're paying for a game? I would like to see, more generally speaking, just a bit of a shift in attitudes towards pricing and payment models in gaming. Is there no argument for something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey to be free to play, but maybe on a subscription model instead, because you then can have 300 hours of content that is just added to again and again, whereas a smaller game, you know, that is only a limited number of hours but is actually really pushing the boundaries in terms of some piece of tech, like that gets to price itself up a bit because that's how much it costs to make, instead of having to just be devalued and maybe lose some of its qualities because they can't justify the price. I think we've got really into the habit of just going, there's £10 games, £20 games, £40 games and above, and we really shouldn't have to think like that.
No, we should not, Liz. But I think we will have to call it a day there with our controversial opinions. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you can take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really, really helps us out. I know I say this twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. It really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show, and thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely, genuinely, genuinely does mean a lot. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Oxenfree, and now that I've finally finished Persona 5, I have downloaded it, so it's all ready to go for me, Lewis.
Nice one. Yeah, I've still not started it, but it's installed for me as well. Looking forward to it. I've felt like my gaming time's been restricted in the last couple of weeks, so I need to really make some time for it, I think.
Nice one, man. Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to getting started with it. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.